Welcome back to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation. Mandy, how are you doing?
I'm still trying to get energy back from this weekend, but I'm
Oh,
good. I'm good. How are you?
it was a great weekend. Very busy on my side and yours. I guess I could share my side, which was at the coffee mug you just had up in the air, which was Weld Your Metal. I ran the 24 hours at your event. It was very well run. I enjoyed all of it except for the sideways rain. And so I don't know, maybe next time, can you figure that out somehow?
We paid extra for the sideways rain.
Or you
We
didn't
actually
charge? I actually was telling people you didn't charge extra for that. I said it's
no.
included. I said it's
It was included.
included.
It was free, and then before the race started, we had hauled in a bunch of really fine dirt and just laid it
mm,
over the course. That way, when the
hmm.
sideways rain came
Yeah.
in, it made the mud that piled up on your shoes like triple.
Well, the joke's on you, Mandy, because I took some of that fine, coarse dirt home with me, and I'm still finding it in my truck and in my shoes and in my clothes and in just about everything, my sleeping bag, everything that I brought with me to Weld County. So, yeah, joke's on you.
Yeah, the sun finally emerged at about 11 a.m. on Monday as we were cleaning up from the whole event. And I tried to be happy about the sun, but I felt so targeted. I
Mm.
was so mad. I was like, "Oh, now you're here? Oh, now it's not pouring rain."
I
But
actually,
it makes for better stories and cool pictures
yeah,
and a lot of ruined shoes.
decently dirty shoes, yes. I feel targeted as a matter of fact because I feel like the rain has been following me. So I went out to Welder Metal. It rained the whole time I was there for 24 hours. I drove down to Denver, went to the Rockies Yankees game, which got a rain delay in the middle of the fifth for about 2 hours. Where I left the stadium, went to Starbucks, and worked on my computer 3 blocks away from Coors because I didn't want to feel like I was wasting time. So standing in the corral underneath the bleachers there, or in the stadium itself, where everyone else was waiting for who knows how long, because you never know with those things. And it was just lightning and flash banging everywhere. So eventually I didn't go back to the game. I just left at 5.5, and I listened to it in my headset while I kept working at Starbucks. I went to Boulder, and decided to run in the fast wave that I was seated in, even though initially I was going to run in the slower wave and just kind of enjoy the day. But I looked at my weather app and it said it was going to rain later in the day. So I decided to go with the fast wave. And at mile 4, it came down on us like buckets of rain. Like I had to wipe the water away from my eyes because I was running into it. So then I haven't ran since then, except for today, this afternoon. I worked all morning, and just before this call, I had a little window, about an hour and 15 minutes to get the dog out. I was trying to explore a new trail in behind my house, so I thought I'd just get out and poke around in the trail a little bit. And I got rained on. It hasn't rained here in 2 days, and I got sprinkled on. So I feel targeted. I feel like every time I go outside now, it is just going to rain. If I'm going to put on running shoes, it's going to rain.
So you are the cloud.
Yeah, I am the black cloud. So
Maybe it's just Mother Nature has decided that you need an extra level of strength training
mm,
that
to
comes with
do,
running in the
yeah.
rain or mental
I, I,
training.
I was going to say that might be mental strength training, but I see where you're going with it.
Yeah, I don't know. The damage that was done on a lot of people that I'm hearing from this weekend from the mud, like it's interesting how those conditions change that experience, like the aches and pains that come along with it that you don't think about, especially if you're just running all the time. You're not thinking about strength training, but like if you think about running
Mm-hmm.
for like our so the winners of this race ran 100 to 120 miles, and that's a long time to be dragging wet, muddy filled shoes, especially if you didn't think it was going to pour rain and you didn't bring 3 different pairs of shoes and you have maybe one or two. Yeah, it's a lot of toll on the body, mentally and physically. I don't know what was worse, mental or physical, for the mud.
Actually, for me, I was only out there for 24 hours, and actually, I didn't even run the full 24 hours by any means. I wasn't racing. I was looking to get 100K in, 62 miles. I wound up calling it quits at 52 at 4 a.m. when it started to rain again. And I only had 4 more hours left, and I decided just to go in my truck and start packing up and getting ready to go to Denver. I thought that was going to be the best bet, but apparently that rain just followed me down to Denver. But I think the hardest part for me was physical, and I say that, and that doesn't really have to do with anything in the course. The course was flat. It was like a 2 mile horseshoe that you turned around at the far end and then came back on yourself the 2 miles for a 4 mile loop. So a sort of an out and back of sorts. And it was on it had undulating terrain. I don't know. I didn't even look, but it was probably maybe 150 feet per 4 miles. I'm taking a guess at that.
Yeah, I think it was
But
150.
but I'm I'm a mountain guy, and I realized that this weekend, because even on just the 13 laps that I did, the 52 miles, like one of my hips got super tight because it was just so repetitive. There was no change in terrain other than 150 feet per 4 miles, which isn't very much at all.
Mm.
So I actually was like surprised that I was like, oh, I am the guy that needs a change in terrain to kind of mix up the muscle groups. Like I love getting to across the creek at Twin Lakes to go up Hope Pass, because all of a sudden, although I'm changing the whole shift. I'm going into hiking mode. I'm using different muscle groups. I'm breaking out the poles. I'm starting to just do something different than run. So I thought, running the 52 miles was actually kind of challenging for me physically on that
Yeah,
terrain.
I don't think I would ever run my own race. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, I want everyone to come and run it, but it's a different kind of runner. It takes a different kind of preparation, different mindset, different strength training altogether. You have to be willing to not have that break of big uphill, big downhill, because it's just kind of monotonous. But
Yeah,
you get the comfort of an aid station every 2 miles, essentially. Like
that's true. And I did appreciate. I didn't carry one thing actually between while I was running. I didn't carry a backpack. I didn't carry a water bottle, because I had an aid station every 2.05 miles or whatever it came out to be. So I was able to get some drinks on the other side, and I was eating food on this side, and I was just kind of going back and forth. And I passed my truck every time, or twice a lap on the out and back. So even if I wanted something out of my vehicle, I was just right there on the side of the trail. So lots of opportunities to not need to wear packs. But to go back to my hip, the front of my hip being sore, it kind of ties into today's guest, because I kind of asked this question later on in the show. But we have Brian Burkhardt back from Range Physiotherapy. He was on episode 59, which was now 9 episodes ago. So it's been a little bit of a change of pace, a little longer than I wanted to have the second episode recorded, but we finally got him back, and we kind of finished up the topics of some common running injuries and how do we prevent them. And then we get into gym and strength training, which kind of falls into my hip issue, or the tightness in my hip from repetitive motions. So yeah, I think it was a great conversation. I really enjoy connected with him through PT, just as a reminder, locally here when I was working through my Achilles tendinopathy. And he's starting a local run group, but I just went to it on this Monday. And and so it's just kind of snowballing into a friendship and a good professional relationship where we're sharing a lot with each other. So it's great.
Yeah, I think episodes like this are a good reminder of the resources, the professionals that we're tapping into to be smart, healthy, well-prepared runners. We kind of talk a little bit about, we pay for these races, and we invest in the race, and we invest in the swag, and we invest in the cool shirt that we want to wear on the course. But are we always thinking about investing in a run coach, in PT, in proper strength training, not just going to the hype boot camp gym workout, which is great, but are we spending time really focusing on like, what are our imbalances? Are we doing ourselves a favor? Are we properly trained for this race? And I don't think it doesn't have to be over the top. It doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to even be once a week, but just every once in a while. So I enjoyed this conversation with Brian. It's kind of a reminder. I think these professionals are always learning. They're always growing in their research and able to offer us more insight into new findings, and let's use them. They're there and they care about us as runners.
Yeah, it's a great part too. It's a great segue. If you missed episode 59, go scroll back on your favorite platform and go listen to that one first, because this one kind of just works right through it. That one had a different co-host though, so don't mind that guy. But anyway, Mandy's here now, and we're plugging along. And episode 2 with Brian Burkhardt from Range Physiotherapy. We would love for you to share, like, and subscribe as much as possible. And thanks for listening. Hey, Brian, welcome back to the podcast. Gosh, you were on, let's just recap. It's Brian Burkhardt from Range Physiotherapy, my physical therapist from PT from Valley View Hospital. I was coming back from Achilles tendinopathy, which is still going well. I ran with Brian this weekend, and I ran with Mandy this weekend. So we'll talk about that later. But welcome back to the show. Brian was on episode 59 with the former co-host. I think his name was Simon. Maybe that was his name. I can't even remember.
We love you, Simon.
Well, welcome back, Brian.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
On the episode in 59, I just had to revisit it just to kind of put myself back in perspective because it was a few weeks ago. We talked about common runner injuries to the knees, ankles, feet, and some bone density issues or concerns as well. With Simon, we thought we'd revisit it and do a second episode, so we're back now. Maybe we want to just finish up with some of those topics, continue on that thread for a minute. Does that sound fair enough?
Sounds great.
Cool. I'm getting a lot of volume lately. My athletes are getting volume. It's late May. It's almost, well, shoot, it's dang near June already. So lots of volume happening. We're getting into the summer season. We're getting into the thick of racing here.
Mm-hmm.
And myself and some athletes included are coming down with shin splints or shin splint-like symptoms. What are they? How can we treat them? What are some preventative measures that we could take before we get them?
Sure. So the latest consensus is that shin splints is actually not on the bone stress injury continuum. So, which is good news since, as we talked about in the last episode, that bone stress injuries is kind of one of those full stop injuries. So, but the question is then, okay, what is causing pain and symptoms? And so kind of the latest consensus is that it's actually what we call a periostitis. And so the periosteum is like the connective tissue that surrounds bones. And what they're finding is that it's actually the muscles pulling it, where the muscles insert or attach to the bone, that so your calf muscles in this case, your gastrocnemius and your soleus, especially the soleus is one of the main running muscles, attaches to the inner side of our tibia bone there where people have symptoms. And it's really that tensioning or traction force of the muscle pulling on that connective tissue that surrounds the bone that can create some pain, irritation, and inflammation. So at the end of the day, it's still kind of the same issue that with a lot of injuries where it's an issue of loading or overuse. So does the tissue have the capacity to meet the demands that someone's putting under it? So, which is why I think, it's as you're building up your volume this time of year that, it becomes a more common type of injury that you see. So some important facts is that the calf muscles, and therefore the area where people have shin splints, experiences 6 to 8 times our body weight when we're running and jumping. And so that's a pretty big load that most people, aren't applying to their body in other cases. So, and as part of a preventative measure for this, and we'll talk about this probably later, but as far as a reason for why we should be doing other types of exercise besides running to make sure that our tissues have the capacity to meet these large demands that running has, which is multiples of our body weight. So for people who are maybe kind of uncertain, is this medial? So what we call shin splints is medial tibial stress syndrome is kind of the accepted term. And so differentiating that from possibly what might be a stress fracture can be a little bit challenging. But what we're looking for is if you're kind of palpating up the inside of your shin bone there, that if you have an area where you kind of start to feel your symptoms, then you kind of want to keep slowly moving up. Do you still have pain? Do you still have pain? Do you still have pain? If that area is greater than 10 centimeters, there's a good chance that that's more of a medial tibial stress syndrome. A bone stress injury is going to tend to be more focal and in a smaller area than that. So additionally, shin splints are more commonly bilaterally, whereas a bone stress injury is going to be usually more unilaterally on one leg. Typically, depending on the severity, the average resting period or recovery period for shin splints is about 10 weeks. So you're looking at, a period of time where you're offloading or reducing load to especially the calf muscles. So which doesn't mean that you can't do calf strengthening, and I would say that that's something that you probably should be doing, but the things that are really going to be loading the calf muscles and especially the tissues that we're talking about here is going to be more of the plyometrics. So the running, jumping, and things like that is what you're going to want to back off on for that period of time and kind of let symptoms calm down. Some other options of things that you can do to kind of manage this would be to run on softer surfaces rather than on harder surfaces. So cement, pavement, that type of thing you generally want to avoid. A couple other things that you can do to manage symptoms while things are irritated would be to anything that's going to offload the calf muscle. So same thing would go for someone with, say, an Achilles tendon issue, inserting a heel wedge or using a higher heel drop shoe. So moving away from the zero drop type of shoes and moving more towards something that's like a 10 millimeter type heel is going to help offload those calf muscles and therefore the tension on those tissues. And then last thing that you can kind of play around with as far as managing symptoms would be you're going to increase load to those areas by having a more impactful heel landing when you're running. So trying to land kind of more, midfoot to forefoot is also a way that you can kind of, I would say probably more like midfoot would be a way that you can kind of decrease the demand on those tissues. So those are some ideas of ways that you can kind of manage it.
There's a bunch of crap on the internet, and I don't know, I think I read and hear a lot of like, if you have shin splints, it's due to the shoes being old or needing to replace your shoes. Is there any merit to that, or is that just a wives' tale?
You needing new shoes to manage shin splints?
Like you're getting the shin splints because of shoes that have been 500 miles, old shoes, that are just dead in the water, and maybe replacing these shoes would help.
I would say that there's definitely some evidence to support that could be a factor. There is some research that shows orthotics, including something that has more of like a medial wedge, so where the inside of your foot is a little bit more elevated than the outside of your foot, can kind of offload that area. So the other component of this is that there's actually some bending that occurs in our bones when you're running and loading them. And so it's almost, again, like kind of a traction force where the bone is almost tractioning or being put on tension. So that alone, I would say, is sufficient to support the idea that footwear definitely can play a role in this type of condition, and therefore it could be a way to manage it.
Yeah, Brian, I was going to ask, I've had a lot of athletes when I used to coach that would suddenly switch shoes because like there was a new trend about a zero drop, and they'd switch shoes, and then that caused issues with shin splints or other issues, or ramping up in mileage too fast, or jetting off to the hills and going from a flat road runner to all of a sudden now you're running 100% of your runs up on hills. Have you like been able to dissect, like when you see some of these injuries, like most of the injuries that I see come from X, Y, and Z? Like can you kind of say like these are the things that cause most of these injuries most of the time?
I think, again, it's just kind of a disconnect between the load and the tissue capacity. So I don't think that it necessarily has to be because of whether you're doing flat or whether you're doing hills. I mean, it's certainly a common injury that I know, like one of my local friends here who's a high school jumps coach has asked me a lot about, and his athletes see this injury quite a bit as well. And but I think for high school coaches it's challenging because you're seeing these athletes for 3 months out of the year, and and you're asking a huge amount of demand in a short period of time, and you don't necessarily have kind of that year-long training plan to gradually ramp things up. Yeah, again, I mean, I think that's the key. Whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're a high school jumping athlete or you're a trail runner or an ultra marathon runner, like both ends of the spectrum, have you taken the time to gradually and properly build up to those loads and capacities?
It's also, I mean, just to generally kind of state maybe the obvious, it's a great time to be cross-training if you're having these symptoms, right? To get on the bike, to get in the pool, to do something just a little bit different, and stay off of those calves and stop putting that 6 to 8 times pressure on your calves by impacting the ground, whether it's, loading yourself for the long jump pit or for the 20-mile trail run, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, biking is a great option if you're, kind of full on and medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints.
Cool. I think we nailed that one down. I feel good about it. Anything else? If not, let's move on to the other thing I'm getting right now myself as well. And I'm just I'm just getting old as well, but I'm just stiff everywhere. But generally, we all are getting older every day. Good point, Brian. I like that. Hip tightness or lack of hip mobility. Gosh, I mean, I just feel like I just move one direction unilaterally, and if I feel some pings, I jump on the bike, and I'm pretty much doing the same exact thing the whole time as well. So there's not much going on. I mean, maybe in trail running, I'm doing a little bit of this because of the undulating terrain, but it's not much, if at all. So, how do I deal with the hip tightness? How do I get a little bit of more range of motion back, and how do I keep it when I do regain it back?
Yeah. So I think like the first point that I want to make here with this is that running, you need obviously like a certain amount of hip mobility, but I would say where most of the time there's a deficiency is hip extension, meaning like when your leg, when you're pushing off your toes and your leg is extended back behind you. And if you think about that position, that is the exact opposite of sitting, which is what most of us do most of the day. And so I think like that is usually kind of like the crux of the issue. And that's where most runners that I see are limited. And as a lifelong runner with lifelong hip challenges, I would say like, yeah, I've lived this for 25 years of trying to manage hip mobility. Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's about managing. And obviously some people, you know, if you do a lot of traveling, you're sitting in the car, you know, you're driving hours to your next race or your long run, or you're flying somewhere and you're in that hip flexion position for an extended period of time. I mean, that actually, I mean, can shorten our muscles. And so our muscles are made up of muscle fibers, and there's little segments along those fibers called sarcomeres, and you can actually lose sarcomeres, and you know that's how your muscles actually get shortened. In some cases, usually after like a surgery, like people can actually get joint contractures where, you know, your joint just loses range of motion, and that's not just the muscles, that's the joint capsule and everything. But when we're talking about the hips, I think for the most part, what I see is that it's the muscles in the front of the hip that are the primary restriction. And the problem with that is that not only is that going to shorten your stride length, but you're not going to be able to get like an effective push off. And also there's this idea of reciprocal inhibition where if, you know, in order for a joint to move, not only do you need to contract the muscles on one side, the muscles on the opposite side need to relax. And the way that our bodies are designed is that when your muscles and tendons, we have these receptors that give a signal of those tissues being stretched, and they respond by either contracting to prevent like an injury, for example. And so when you get a stretch and those sensory organs in our tendons and our muscles sense that, then they're going to want to go the other way. And so the problem there is that like if you're constantly getting that stretch signal in the front of your hips, it's going to make you a very like quad dominant run of your body muscle runner. Whereas, you know, we really want to be strong in what we call the posterior chain, so the back of our hips and the back of our legs. And if you don't have that range of motion available, it's going to be hard to have an efficient and effective stride. So, okay, what do we do, I guess, about that is like, do we do stretching or do we do other types of exercises? So I think, you know, in some cases, like you know, I think stretching has kind of generally been falling out of favor. But, you know, as one of my physical therapy professors always said, you know, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a time and a place. And when you do have a shortened muscle, which is to be clear that like a strong muscle doesn't necessarily mean a stiff muscle, doesn't necessarily mean a short muscle. So those three things I would say are all separate. But when you do have a shortened muscle, that doing low load, long duration stretching, meaning like multiple minutes on a daily basis, can be effective for lengthening. Now, I think, again, the challenge is like, well, are you doing a hip flexor stretch or quad stretch for 3 minutes a day, but then you're sitting for 8 hours every day? I'd say that might be more of a case of just management. What I like is before running, so I traveled and was on a plane and was sitting for a lot of hours this past weekend, and really like the one exercise, one of my favorite exercises in general, but especially like as kind of a transition from sitting to running, is doing a single leg bridge. So if you bring like, you know, lay on your back with your knees bent and kind of lift your hips up, that's the bridge exercise is what we call that. And if you lift one knee up towards your chest and kind of go up and down with one leg, you're going into hip extension. But why I think that this is better than stretching in a lot of cases is that you're engaging your gluteal muscles at the same time. So it's more of an active mobility type exercise. So you're getting those glutes to fire, you're getting your hips through that range of motion, ready for the range of motion and mobility you need for running.
Yeah, Brian, I've been doing this a lot at a new place I'm training. It's like 15, 30 minutes once a week. It's just really weird. It's all focused on eccentric, but I'm learning. And I think I know it sometimes in my running gait that I've got like a really strong posterior on the left and I'm really strong in the front on my right. But I luckily, knock on wood, I've been able to get through races without having any injuries. So it's kind of like I wouldn't think about it a whole lot unless I went into this place and really got like measured by a computer that told me my strengths and weaknesses. Like to that note, when we talk like to runners, sometimes it's if it's not broke, don't fix it. At what level do you think it's important for runners to get evaluated of like what's strong, what's weak? Do we wait for injury? Do we evaluate on the front end, or where in the middle do we try to evaluate these to catch them before they become season ending for us?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely don't think waiting until injury is the right answer here. I mean, as someone who, tries to rehab people through lots of injuries, I would, much prefer that people come into me like when they're feeling what you're describing, like something just maybe feels like a little off or a little asymmetrical, or, when I'm X number of miles into a run, like it's so much easier to address these issues at that point than when you have a full-blown injury, because then you're talking about like a period of resting and getting weaker and that type of thing. So I definitely encourage people to, I would say anyone, honestly, who is trying to run like a marathon, ultra marathon, and hasn't like done a running gait analysis, like I think it's a good idea, just because, I think whether you're trying to prevent injury or you're just trying to improve your performance, I think that there's a lot that you can gain from that. So I actually just got a new tool that I was telling Brian about on our run earlier this week. It's from a company in Belgium, but it's an IMU, which is an inertia measurement unit. And so it's a belt that you wear around your waist. But the thing that I like about it is that you can wear it for outside, like trail running. It's the best way of giving you basically information about your gait without being on a treadmill. And so what's nice is that you can compare like what is your pelvis doing and how well are you landing and absorbing shock. What is your ground contact time? All those types of things, you can get that data from this belt, and like that will tell you where your asymmetries are. So for me, I kind of had a recent flare up with my right hip that I had a labral tear on a few years ago, and I've been wearing it for my runs, and I can see kind of like, okay, right now, like maybe when I get to a certain mileage, that like what it refers to as dynamic instability, which is measuring how much movement's in your hip. I can clearly see that at like 8 miles that it's the right is not doing as well as the left. So it can be a good tool also to kind of, I would say in that sense, like say like, okay, here's where you're at, so that you don't overtrain or, progress to an injury, but you can kind of exactly know like what mileage is safe for the time being. So I think there's a lot of technologies and tools out there right now that I think can really give you a lot of really good information. Yeah, anything that you can do to be more symmetrical, I think is going to be beneficial, because, I work with people, I worked with someone today that was 98 years old, and, I think about us through our entire lifetime. And so again, like, if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're, feeling something is maybe just not symmetrical or just off at this point, I would say, get it looked at and try to get it addressed, because, we only are given one body, and, I think anything that you can do to improve your longevity is going to be to your benefit.
Brian's got that cool tool he was telling me about, but actually most ultra runners I think the most popular watch that I see as a coach is the Garmin brand. I don't have one personally. I use a different company. I use a Sunto watch brand, but the Garmin Connect actually has a lot of those features built into it. You can see ground contact time, stride length, and you could see the imbalances if you were limping, or if you had some anomaly in your stride rate or gait. You could see that in some of the numbers. They should be pretty even at like 49.1 to 50.9, or like really close together, if not exactly even and equal. Of course, it depends on terrain and stuff like that Garmin doesn't know. But if you ran down the bike path and see some anomalies in your Garmin Connect data, that might be just an early sign that there's something going on.
All the technology.
All of it. Cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that really is exactly what's going on with me. I kind of know that, but I think it was just worth having a conversation as well. I had a long weekend of traveling around the state of Colorado, so lots of driving, windshield time, and lots of running. So it was basically like running, jumping in the front seat, and running, jumping in the front seat, and continued on until I sat in the chair for the last 2 days at my desk working. So,
Mhm.
so I mean, I know why I'm stiff, but worth the conversation nonetheless.
Yeah.
I think we kind of, I think we covered it all, at least all the questions I had about injuries and or preventative measures, but we could go into something else now. I mean, a 10,000 foot topic would be something like, should ultra runners be in the gym? And we talked about this offline just a few seconds ago, or a few minutes before recording. Like we kind of know the answer to that. I mean, that's kind of like a redundant question. Like we know that ultra runners should be in the gym. We know that endurance athletes should be supplementing their training with strength work. But I think it's a deeper dive I'd like to just maybe discuss and kind of talk about like the periodization of strength training and what that might look like in correlation to volume and season and where I'm at in, if I'm in the base season or if I'm in peak season, and what should we be doing in the gym more so than should we just be in the gym? I mean, I can go to the gym every day, but when I get there, what am I supposed to do when I get there?
Sure. So yeah, like we talked about earlier, I mean, most injuries are going to be a result of tissue load versus the capacity. And so, like I said, so for the calf area, that's like, 6 to 8 times our body weight. But in general, like this overall stress on our bodies, what our body sees when we run is 2.5 times our body weight. And so we need to kind of think about, again, like if that's the demands that we're expecting of our body when we're running, do our tissues have that capacity? And so the reality is that running is not the best thing for strengthening bones or strengthening tendons. And so, there's research that I can kind of cite here as well, as far as like why strength training helps with running economy and injury prevention. But at the end of the day, like we need to make sure that our bodies can withstand that load, especially over ultramarathon distances. So the best thing for strengthening bone and tendon is going to be heavy loaded strength training and plyometrics. And those are going to be more like 3.5 times our body weight when you're doing like high level plyometrics, and which is obviously a lot more than the demands of running. So if you really want to be able to go for really long distances and not get injured, you need to be doing some amount of strength training and plyometrics, because those are going to be the things that strengthen your bones and your tendons and the things that we see most injuries in. So real quick, there was an article in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that was a systematic review. It looked at 25 trials, 26,000 participants, and they didn't see any changes with kind of more of, I would say, the control group was with stretching. But what they did see is that strength training reduced sports injuries by a third, as far as like acute injuries, and then overuse injuries were almost halved. So I think there is pretty strong evidence out there that can be found that, would support why you should be getting in the gym. So the question is like, well, how do you fit this into your busy schedule and your training schedule and all the miles that you're supposed to be getting in? So I think to your question about like the seasonality, like we want to be doing more of our strength training in our quote unquote off season, which I am a big advocate for, either like changing sports seasonally or having, more of a lighter season, I guess. Not going full on competition year round, I don't think is the best idea for longevity and injury prevention. So, but doing the weight training, whether that's in the winter or whatever you consider your off season, trying to get in and be doing at least like twice a week, I would say, with heavy weights would be a good idea. So, and then as you get into the competition phase, then you can kind of start to back off of the weight training. So the important thing to kind of differentiate it or to know, I guess, is that what causes muscle soreness is time under tension. So things like plyometrics, which are quick ballistic type movements, aren't going to make you very sore. So those you can and should keep doing through your competition season. Whereas as you kind of get closer to your primary races, you do kind of want to start to back off on the heavy weightlifting, which is going to be, multiple seconds that you're lifting, ideally a heavy barbell and or something like that, which is going to cause more muscle soreness. So you also want to try to, like, if you can, ideally, do your strength training on the same day that you're doing either your speed work or your plyometric work. So, and there's a couple reasons for that, is that, those things are all like kind of maximally recruiting our motor units. So you're sending a consistent signal to your brain as far as like what is kind of the theme and the goal of today. And there's even like good evidence to say that doing some heavy lifting before your run can improve running economy. So I wouldn't be afraid to lift heavy and then go run, because it can really help recruit all of the motor units. And by that I mean, like, when we're doing a slow jog or like an ultra marathon pace, I mean you're only using a small portion of your muscle fibers. And so this is kind of where blood flow restriction training is also kind of gaining some speed, is that anything that you can do occasionally to recruit all of the motor units of your entire muscle, including the fast twitch muscle fibers, is going to build strength, and that's going to translate into improving running economy and that type of thing. So that's kind of how I would structure it. The other reason to do it on the same day is that, again, like that time under tension, it's going to create muscle soreness. And so you don't want to be, you either want to do like your hard running workout and then rest a couple days, or, you want to at least like a couple days in between, a harder run and lifting day. So, but if you do them on the same day, then you kind of have, ideally like more of a rest day the next day. And then, you can be refreshed rather than wearing yourself down and making yourself sore multiple days in a row. So, as far as like specific exercises, I mean, I don't have a lot of time. I'm pretty busy working 2 jobs and running my own practice. But I would say that the one exercise that I do, and this is with 2.5 times body weight. So meaning like I'm doing my own body weight, and then I'm doing a barbell with 1.5 times my body weight. And so the one that I really like is like basically a lunge or a split squat. So, I mean, you certainly could do a lunge, just a regular lunge, but I like when the back foot is elevated a little bit on a bench. And what that's going to do is it's going to pitch you forward a little bit more. So it's going to be a little bit more of a hip or glute dominant type of movement rather than a quad dominant type of movement. Kind of circling back to the prior conversation about hip mobility. One of the faults that I tend to see in running analysis is people who do tend to fully straighten their knee when they're swinging it through and are just what we would consider like more quad dominant runners rather than hip dominant runners. So that's why I like that exercise. I would say that, even when I'm super limited on time, like I can get in 3 sets of, 6 to 10 reps of doing those. And I can get that done in 15 or 20 minutes. I know on the rest periods, I might be doing like an upper body exercise, like pull-ups or overhead press or something like that. So that's the exercise I like, because squats, it's more specific to what we do as trail runners, right? Mm-hmm. So squats are okay, but it's like you're equally weighted on double legs. More of a lunge is going to load more of our side hip muscles, which is where people tend to be weak. So last time we talked about doing like a side plank with the top leg lifted as being a great exercise. Mm-hmm. I would say as far as like having zero equipment, I do still think that's one of the best exercises, but if you do have access to heavy weights and a gym, that I do think the split squats where you can really load it up, assuming that, you've kind of gradually built up to that weight, obviously, is one of the best. And, that's going to be really working those muscles for climbing up hills, hiking uphill, and that type of thing. It's going to work on your hip pelvic stability, hip mobility as well. So I think there's a lot of really great things to come from that. And just single leg, it's really hard to do heavy weight with just standing on one leg. Mm-hmm. Jay DeSherry, who taught the course that I took in Denver last month, will say that, if you should be able to single leg deadlift half of what you can double leg deadlift, because the only difference is stability. And so, I mean, I think, there's some arguments for doing single leg deadlifts as well. But personally, I think that you get a lot of the same benefits from doing like a lunge as you would a single leg deadlift. But we'll kind of talk more about, yes, I mean, you should be doing some single leg exercises, and I can talk about that later.
Yeah, I know Mandy lives in or has lived in the past in the for lack of a better term, the gym rat world, at least from the ultra runner. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. But where I'm going with this is that I think there's probably some merit to maybe getting that one personal training session, maybe 2 or maybe even the 3 little package. Maybe not every week you need to do it, but just to kind of make sure you're performing it correctly. Your knees aren't going out or in a weird angle or anything like that. So I think there is something to that. Mandy, can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I owned a group fitness studio for a while and had great trainers at my facility. But even now as a runner, like I think I'm finding more value personally in going somewhere that I'm slowing down, being more intentional with the workouts, again, kind of evaluating the differences on the right side, the left side, forward range of motion, side to side, kind of seeing, like, I'm wondering what the trends have been just with all the new workouts and modalities. Like, are we moving away from, I know I am personally, probably just because I'm burnt out. Like, I owned a gym during COVID. So if you put me in a boot camp group fitness studio right now, I cringe for so many different reasons. But I also wonder, like, are we becoming smarter runners, and are we thinking more about our bone density and the longevity? Especially, we see more women in this sport, and we're thinking about our bone density as we age in this, that, like, maybe the smartest place for us to be is not at a high intensity 500, not 550 people in a boot camp class doing wall balls as much as we can, as fast as we can, deadlifting and that competition piece. Like, I think, is it smarter for us to be thinking, like, yeah, those are fun and those keep us motivated, and the social part is still important, but should we be doing those while, to Brian's point, we're seeing a PT or a personal trainer every so often to make sure that what we're doing is focused? And when we're in the middle of that high competition class, we're thinking about, oh, my right side is not as activated as my left. And I'm getting to that space. Like, I'm almost 40. And so I'm like, I need to start thinking about how I'm moving my body, not just doing it because all these things are good and we should squat and deadlift and blah, 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 throw the balls in the wall and my team won. Yay, fun boot camp class, but getting more intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for all the reasons that you already mentioned, that group classes are popular. A lot of times, like, people just want to be told what to do and not have to really, like, overthink it. And certainly kind of having that social component, I think, are all good things. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that by any means. But also to your point that, when you're constantly in kind of maybe that competitive environment where, and this could go for just running on Strava too. It's like, I mean, you're always trying to kind of, like, get that medal and, get that PR and be king of the mountain, that I think that, on both of those cases that you can certainly, like, push yourself beyond, your limits. But I mean, we all need rest days. So, we don't get stronger by doing workouts. We get, our muscles get stronger in the rest periods after the workout. So, recovery is really important. I actually know Christy Ashwanden, who wrote the book Good to Go. She's has been a professional Nordic skier here in Western Colorado. But that whole book is about all these kind of latest recovery modalities that exist out there. And anyways, yeah, it's a good read that I would suggest checking out. But bottom line is that, yeah, those rest days are important. So I guess the other side of your question, so one of, like, the matriarch, if you will, of physical therapy, Shirley Sarman, has been known for having this quote that, we use our teeth for two things, talking and eating, and we're expected to go to the dentist twice a year. And we use our bodies every day, all day, for everything. And no one does a regular checkup on their body, like you were saying. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, like the things that we do get, like, regular checkups on and maintenance on, and yet we don't do that for our bodies. And like I said earlier, I mean, we're given one body, and, I think that we all need to be kind of mindful of that because, we're not cars. You can't just, replace parts. I mean, there's certain cases, obviously, like, where we do joint replacements and things like that, but it's not ideal. So we need to be treating our bodies like, this is the one that you've been given and it needs to last a long time. Yes, definitely. I think, like, seeing a physical therapist or a personal trainer if you're getting into the gym once, if not a couple times a year, just to, check, make sure that, you have good strength and symmetry and you have the tissue capacity to do the things that you want to do. I think would be wise.
Yeah, I think of it. It's kind of funny, like, how quick we are to drop $100 on a nice dinner. Or I just entered the lottery or the wait list, not the lottery. It'll be a lottery soon, but I just entered the wait list for Cocodona. But, like, the money we spend on our races,
Yeah.
and, like, we got to start switching our mindset to, like, also investing in our body to get to the races, or, replace that fancy dinner with, like you said, a however often checkup with a certified personal trainer or a PT or someone in functional movement that speaks to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, shout out to, Brian and, and the coaches out there too, because I think that, just as valuable and in kind of, help guide people to proper training and injury prevention. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's definitely a team effort. And yeah, I think, like you said, it's not about just signing up and doing the race, but, like finishing it and feeling good about it and wanting to do it again.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I appreciate the shout out. But I do feel like the people that are already invested in the coach have that one foot in the door already. They kind of like, all right, like I'm going to invest all this money and this time and energy into XYZ event coming up in 10 months. And I need a little help and a little structure with it. So I think at the lowest level, maybe the coach is like, all right, like a little guide for them, like just a helper along the way, putting a structure out there, talking about the niggles, like, hey, is it really a niggle or are you injured or where are we at with that? And just kind of maybe being that conversation piece, like talking through the process.
Yep. Brian, do you ever talk to any athletes? Like, I know probably reaching out to coaches, other Brian, there's two Brians here. Brian in the blue, Brian P, Coach Brian. Like, I'm sure you encounter a lot of athletes who come to you and maybe have some imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know if I have the right to talk to you. Do I really need a coach? Like, I'm just beginning. Brian Burkhardt, do you have that same thing? Like, do you ever have to convince someone that like their training, even if they're a beginner or just doing their first race, like that their training is worthy of seeing someone to get help with it? Like that kind of imposter syndrome piece of, does it take a lot for you to convince them like, yes, this should be part of your training even if you are running just a 10K or just your first, quote unquote slow marathon? Like, how do you deal with that
Yeah.
psychological part with your clients?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, the population I see is a little bit self-selecting in the sense that, I'm seeing it doesn't matter, like I would say what the distance is that someone's training for, but it's, do they know, have they had like prior issues that they don't want to come back, or do they, have they tried to run an ultramarathon distance and didn't make the cutoff time, and are trying to improve their speed and efficiency and economy. So I guess like I don't see like too much of maybe like the imposter syndrome piece that you're asking about, because I guess I'm seeing the people who are like choosing to kind of like invest in coming to see me, and they do think, whatever distance it is that they're training for, that, that they've, that they want to be prepared for it and be able to kind of go through with it. And I guess like I would say whether that's, it could be someone who's just starting to run and maybe they are just training for a 10K. But I would say that, in the last 2 weeks, I've done running gait analysis on someone training for a road half marathon or a 10K and a road half marathon, and then another person trying to finish their first 100-miler. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, I guess maybe are people coming to you frustrated? Like if they come to you and they're like, okay, I'm training for this, but this doesn't feel good. Maybe I'm just not cut out for it. Never mind. Like, do you find yourself having to talk people into like, no, this is like pretty common that we have issues and we have imbalances, and it can be someone that's winning these races and they still might come to me. Like, do you find yourself talking people into continuing on with this journey, even if it is a fight? Because I think sometimes we look at people crossing and they're on the podium and we think, oh, it must just come naturally. They're not injured. They're so fast. They're great. And I'm getting beat up, and I have, like poor Brian over here got knee injuries left and right. Just joking, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, maybe it's just in my nature. It's part of being like a physical therapist. But I mean, in a lot of ways, like it is coaching and encouraging and helping people believe in themselves. There certainly is a component to that. Certainly for any distance, but I think, certainly for an ultra marathon, I mean, you have to kind of believe that you can do something before you can do it. So, and I think that's where, I think having a coach is, they're the ones I think who largely, can take on that role. But yeah, I mean, that's really why I like to see, rather than someone come like to see me one time for like a running gait analysis, like I like to see people like a few times so that we can track their progress and show them the data and say like, hey, you are improving, or, these are your numbers, and, this suggests that you're ready for X, Y, or Z. So, I mean, I think there's always a component of helping people believe in themselves. Does that answer your question?
Exactly.
I mean, I get it, and from the coaching side of things, I mean, I see like it's multifaceted, right? And I think that's kind of what you're trying to say. It's like the body. We have to do the training to the body to either keep it healthy or continue to build and grow and get stronger or faster or more endurance or whatever we're trying to do with our bodies. But we also have to have the mindset as well. And we just talked about that last week on the podcast with Terry and that app that he was using. And they kind of just go hand in hand a little bit, and in the fact that like it's multifaceted, right? So like we could do all the work and be physically fit, but we still might have some emotional, mental challenges to work through in order to believe that we belong at that starting line, or that we've done enough work to get to that finish line. So I think it's multifaceted on both ends, it sounds like.
Sure.
Well, we appreciate your time, Brian. Thanks so much for stopping in. I wanted to obviously address the final elephant in the room, which is that Simon had asked me for, like 60 episodes or so. Is running bad for my knees, Brian?
Okay. Yes. So, or that's not the answer to the question. But yes, the question that Simon has asked numerous times. I know. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a common misconception, right? As we talked about in the last episode, like knee pain is one of the most common things that people complain of with running. And as far as, the general population goes, also knee pain, knee osteoarthritis is really prevalent as well. I think that both of those things kind of compound to kind of create this notion that, runners tend to have bad knees, or it's not good for your knees. And there has been actually like some pretty good research on this, and the American Physical Therapy Association put out a systematic review not too long ago, and it summarized 17 studies. It was like 100,000 people, and they were comparing basically like recreational runners with people who are sedentary to elite competitive level runners. And really kind of to like summarize their findings, they found like this is as far as like development of osteoarthritis, that 3.5% of recreational runners had hip or knee osteoarthritis. Sedentary individuals who did not run had a significantly higher rate of hip and knee osteoarthritis at 10.2%. However, when you're looking at like professional elite level runners, actually had the highest rate of hip and knee osteoarthritis, which was 13.3%. So, and then I kind of was talking to Brian on our run earlier this week, where they did this study with dogs running. So it was like 4 kilometers a day, 5 days a week, 20 kilometers a day, 5 days a week, or 40 kilometers a day for a year. And the higher volume group did actually have more radiographic findings of your changes like in cartilage thickness and subchondral bones. So I mean, I think that there's some evidence out there to kind of, I think, to kind of think about, I suppose. But, really my takeaway is that, I think if you train properly and you have like, good diet and you're sleeping well, and again, like you're taking care of your body like you should be, that, I mean, I think that our bodies are capable of amazing things, including, ultra marathons for decades. But, if you're not training properly and you're kind of stressing your body between, your training schedule, your racing schedule, work, kids, family, life, all those things are stressors that, I think are going to affect your overall like longevity over your lifetime. I mean, I think just if you're smart with those things, that I don't think that really you have too much to worry about. I mean, obviously, like elite level runners are, they're doing super high volumes at super high intensities. It's not just the volume. And so when we look at how much stress our bodies are taking, they've kind of found that there's the same amount of stress, whether it's like walking, jogging, or running per mile or per distance. So I mean, and a lot of ultra marathons are, there's periods of walking or hiking. So, but really, I think that's really
Power hiking.
Power hiking. Sorry, fast walking.
No. Power hiking.
Okay. But that, but there's really not going to be that much more stress on your body. It's just runners probably are doing like longer distances, but there's really not any, that much more stress on your joints over certain distances. Yeah. Does that,
Totally. Yeah.
any other questions about me, about me?
Well, I'm just glad I fall in the 3% because I'm not elite and I'm not sedentary. So I'm just glad I fall right in the. For once, I'm glad I'm not fast or elite.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna stay in the back of the pack.
Yeah. Overall, manageable amount of running, I think, has been shown to be good for our overall health. But like I said, I mean, it's still a part of your overall lifestyle and health. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, Brian, I think that's all I got. And Mandy, anything else you could think of off the top of your head?
No, that was great.
Thanks again, Brian, for coming on episode 2 in the 2-part series. I'm glad we got through it. It took us a minute. We had some changes. Simon and Mandy, the obvious ones. Summer's here. We got busy schedules. We're all over the place. But I look forward to running more with you on the Monday, Wednesday group runs here locally here in Glenwood Springs and catching up with you more often. We'd love to have you back. If we got more questions, we could round up. And if you're listening, you have some questions that you didn't get answered or didn't hear asked today or on episode 58, feel free to, whatever, send them in as a message or hit us up somehow and let us know what those questions are.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on again. Always a great conversation and look forward to keep people in it for the long run.
No pun intended. Thanks, Brian. It was great to meet you.
Great to meet you, Mandy.